Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Vespers. Today is Detroit Pistons Day here on the show, so please take a Detroit basketball moment to like, rate, and subscribe. Liking and subscribing, obviously the big ones on YouTube, subscribing and rating the big ones elsewhere. We finished up 4 out of the 6 divisions. I don't think we're going to get through all 6 of them before Yahoo Leagues actually open, which I know I keep saying could literally be any day now. And as of this moment, well, not this day. Pistons coming off a really impressive year, improved to 44-38, a huge leap over the prior year, where Detroit was 14-68, a 30-win jump. That's one of the biggest you will ever see. And so not surprisingly, FanDuel was like, yeah, we've got him capped out pretty good. Thank you, as always, to our buddies over at FanDuel, the sports book, and FanDuel at large, partners here on the Believe Network and on Old Man Squad. They've got the Pistons regular season win total this coming year set at 44.5. So basically, they're just asking would-be sports bettors, do you think the Pistons can win one more game than they did this past season? And I got to say, I don't know. The part of this that leans me towards yes is that the Eastern Conference just got worse. The Celtics got worse. The Pacers got worse. The Bucks might end up worse. They'd have no Dame, so they're a little bit worse, but Giannis stuff still kind of hanging in the balance. Bulls are the same. Magic probably got better just from a health standpoint. Raptors probably got a little bit better. Hawks maybe a little better. Heat are the same. Knicks are the same. Cavs, I don't know how Cleveland could possibly duplicate what they did this last year. So by all accounts, the pathway for the Pistons is workable. And they were 29-23 against the Eastern Conference. They were a game under 500 against the Western Conference. So there's something to that, this notion of, oh, well, you get to pick on some of the cushier matchups. Yeah, they probably do. But I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's very hard for teams to make leaps of improvement consecutive years. I get it. The number of 44.5 is not requiring that the team make a leap of improvement. It's literally making one very small, sobriety test step in front of the other. They need 45 instead of 44. But, I don't know. Because overall, I don't think the Pistons got better. Malik Beasley was this terrific floor spacer for them. He's under investigation for sports betting stuff. Tim Hardaway Jr. was the secondary floor spacer. He's gone. They replaced those guys with the likes of Duncan Robinson and Caris Levert. So you get spacing in one, you get sort of like slashing and creating with the other. So to me, at least, the Pistons from a personnel standpoint are about the same. From a skill standpoint, we have to now ask ourselves the incredibly difficult question of, do these guys get better? Does Cade have another leap in the tank? Can Jalen Duran get a little bit better? Can Asar Thompson get a little bit better? Can Jaden Ivy stay healthy / get a little bit better? It feels like the simple answer should be, yeah, they can each get a tiny bit better. But also, there's this concept of there's not a target on their back, but they're also not going to surprise a bunch of teams this year. So, I think that Vegas did the thing we all assumed they'd do, which is, not make a sweeping prediction on what the Pistons are going to do this coming season, and said, oh, yeah, you guys, they put the onus on us to figure out what this team's going to be. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really know. Ever so slight lean to the under, but it is microscopic. Let's start our conversation on the players with Cade Cunningham, who took a flying leap forward this past season. Usage up, field goal percent up, rebounds up, assists up, steals up, blocks up, not surprisingly, points up. Terrific year all the way around for Cade. The only thing that was down season over season was free throw percent, but he took an extra free throw a game. So he kind of covered up the slight, and I mean slight, like 1% decrease in free throw percentage with better volume on a good free throw number. Everything else was amazing, except turnovers. 4.4 is a lot of turnovers per game, and he was already a high turnover guy. 3.7, 3.3. That season was cut pretty short. 3.4. Jumping all the way to 4.4 was honestly a bit too much. But also, this is hair splitting 101, because when everything else gets as good as it did for Cade, it's hard to say, yeah, but look at this one thing. But of course, that one big thing was a difference between ranked 28th in 9-cat and 11th. He was a first rounder in 8-category leagues. He played in 70 out of 82 games this last year, so health was decent, but not outstanding. Missing a dozen games is sort of meh. Nothing really all that good or bad about it. But it does, I think, to some degree, kind of shine a light on what sort of format you're playing and what type of team you're building. I say this because most of the mock drafts that I've seen, Cade Cunningham is going in the first round. And I get it. He was a first rounder in 8-cat last year, so it's not that weird to see him go there. But if you're a 9-cat and you're not punting turnovers, he puts a substantial dent into that category. The 9 assists per game, awesome. I mean, you're getting a steal, you're getting a block, you're getting a couple threes, you're getting good percentages. There's a lot to like about Cade Cunningham. I'm not even for a second debating that part of it. And even in 9-cat, when you look at the players that are ahead of them, and some of those guys are up where they are because their turnovers are not all that high, you can make, I think, a very accurate and reasonable argument that Cade should go in front of those guys. But if you're debating between Cade and, say, I don't know, like a Devin Booker, who's probably going to have 7 or 8 assists this coming year and a steal and great percentages and a lot of similar stuff, their numbers actually weren't that different. I know it's weird because it feels like they got there in 2 very different ways, but Devin Booker and Cade Cunningham's numbers were not all that far apart. Booker had a big edge in free throw percent, and Cade had a big edge in blocks. That was the main difference between those two dudes. Not to say that I would always take Booker ahead of Cade, but Devin Booker is probably going to be sitting around 3 turnovers a game, and Cade's probably going to be over 4. It matters in 9-cat. 8-cat, I get it. 8-cat, I get it. But this is generally a 9-category show, so that's kind of what we're focusing on here. The other thing I'd like to point out with Cade is I don't know that he can necessarily do much more. He took 21 shots a game. He had 9 assists. He was a usage, I don't want to say vacuum because he made the team really good, but he was a usage vacuum. 33. I mean, these are some of the biggest usage numbers in the NBA. Last year, it was LaMelo, Luka, Shea, Giannis, Zion, Paolo, Cade Cunningham. That was the usage board. Trae Young's was weirdly low, all things considered. But when you consider the fact that Cade was already top 7 in the NBA in usage rate, I just don't see how there's room for him to go much higher. The way that his rank goes higher in 9-cat is if the turnovers go from 4.4 down to 3.9. That's how he can move another decent chunk up. Because those turnovers are so high, they become sort of like a negative outlier. In the same way we talk about how these positive outliers can really influence a rank up the board, Cade's negative outlier influenced his rank pretty strongly down the board. In my mind, I'd like to take Cade in the second round in 9-cat. Because again, all these guys at the top of the board are going to be relatively high turnover guys. You have to think of it more like the difference between Cade and the other guys you're looking at in the first or second round. Where someone like a James Harden and again, I'm not necessarily comparing the two guys, also had 4.3 turnovers, but more defensive stats, more threes, better free throw, lower field goal, similar scoring, slightly less. Like there's these arguments to be made. Okay, how am I doing my team build? This season's a little bit of a weird one. I'll give you guys that because of the number of injuries at the top of the board. It still feels to me like we're pushing a little too soon in 9-cat on Cade, because you don't have to punt turnovers taking Cade in the first round. It's not like with Trae Young where you're forced into punting field goal because otherwise he's way the hell down the board. Remember where Trae was? Trae was 51 in 9-cat last year. Field goal and turnovers were both a huge issue. Cade was still 28 in 9-cat. But again, I just like, I've said this same phrasing, and I want you guys to hang on to it. You don't have to punt the thing that the guy is really bad at if you take them ahead of what their 9-category rank would be. But it would probably make your life easier if you started to build into that a little bit. Now, one of the beauty parts of the old man squad style of drafting teams is that if you draft a guy like Cade Cunningham with those 4.4 turnovers, you don't actually have to immediately punt turnovers, because we're ultimately going to take a few guys that are super low turnovers type guys when other people are not. Second, third, fourth round, we're probably going to end up with someone like an example would be like a Jimmy Butler, who's a pretty good assist guy, but he does it on low turnovers. He's a good efficiency guy. Kawhi is like one of the risk guys we always end up taking, and he's a low turnover, high fantasy value guy. Not like, it's going to happen. It's inevitable. There are going to be a couple of rounds where we take someone who's a little quieter but efficient, and it'll balance out if there's one really bad turnover guy. So you don't have to do it. I still would prefer to go second round on Cade. I realize that might not be feasible given all the injuries, but something to think about at the very least. Jalen Duran is the next name on the board. I moved my face around on YouTube and I kind of screwed that part up. Jalen Duran is coming off a really interesting year because he finished, by totals, he was number 46 because he was extraordinarily durable this last year. That, by the way, was a good sign in and of itself, because if you remember, this was his third season in the NBA. He played 67 out of 82, 61 out of 82, and then he got up to 78 this year. So all systems go on that front. Also, in terms of the systems being go, Jalen Duran got better as the season went on. Overall, he was number 78. Second half of the year, he was number 48. Which, and I'd like to say that it like continually got better as you work your way down the stretch. It did not, because his free throw number fell off a cliff at the end of the season. But overall, like, the funny thing is that his minutes actually they changed a little bit. He was like around 25 the first half of the season, and he was more like 27 the second half, but that doesn't explain a jump from 100 to 50. It was more so that stuff just kind of started to click a little bit. The rebounding went up by 1. Every field goal attempt he takes is a big deal because he's a super high field goal percent guy. It's funny, like the change between the first half and the second half was not that substantial in terms of what he was doing, but that extra shot and a half per game, that goes a long way for a guy who's low scoring, high field goal percent dude. Is Jalen Duran a top 50 fantasy play this coming year? That's a hard one, because you're looking at a guy who had one really good free throw shooting year out of 3. YouTubers can see that on the screen. Cade being a bigger part of the Pistons offense this year and having some floor spacing allowed Duran to pretty much just dunk the ball every time he touched it. I mean, 69% is a crazy number. His minutes were lower, but his defensive stats were better. And that makes me a little bit nervous, because I don't know that those are necessarily going to hold. It feels like what we got this last year was more what it should have been, and he had a down defensive stat season in his second year in the NBA, because his rookie season he was at 1.6, In 25 minutes, in 29 minutes, it went down to 1.3. This season, in 26 minutes, it went back up to 1.8. So it feels like that 1.8 type defensive stat marker is probably where you're looking. At the very least, it feels like he should be able to replicate what he did for the full season this past year when he was, again, like kind of top 80, top 75 range. You're probably going to have to draft him a little bit sooner than that. I'm generally okay with it. I think he profiles as kind of like a back end of the Jarrett Allen corridor kind of center. Which, for the uninitiated, the Jarrett Allen corridor is an area, I guess I should say, make sure I get my subjects and objects right. The Jarrett Allen corridor is a stretch of fantasy pre-ranks, typically, or ADPs, that have about 10 centers in about 35 picks, and most of them are very safe. And Jalen Duran is a relatively safe center. I just think he belongs more towards the back end of that group. I don't think that we're about to see him go plowing ahead to 32 minutes a ball game. I'm not sure that they feel his body can always take that kind of workload. There is definitely upside in Duran in the potential increase of workload. B-Ball Paul, Isaiah Stewart, these are your backup centers. Those are guys that are likely to see the floor. So again, it's not just going to be gifted. Duran's not going to just be gifted 32 minutes a ball game. But hey, what if he gets to 28 instead of 27? These are ways that he can make those incremental improvements. So look for him. My guess is he probably gets drafted around 50. I'd obviously rather take him around 60. I'm okay if you took him at 50. I think there might be a better Jarrett Allen corridor type of option there. But Duran's likely to be decent at the very least. Let's talk Ausar Thompson next. He's a player that, I don't want to call him like fantasy polarizing, because I think most analysts agree that the outlines of fantasy ability are thick. They're drawn in thick marker, but getting him there consistently required, at times, other player absences or an increase in minutes that was not happening every single day. He strikes me, though, and I haven't said this about that many players in our sort of carousel around the NBA. Ausar Thompson is probably the type of player you want to put in your first group of flyers. If he gets drafted earlier than that, you might just kind of have to shrug and go, well. But remember, you get into flyers pretty quickly after 100. Pick 105, 110 range. You start to get into the flyers, meaning the guys where you don't know. You mostly know what guys are doing before that. Not all the way. Like, obviously, we thought Alex Caruso was going to play more than 19 minutes a game. We're not going to get everything right. But by and large, the guys through pick 65 to 75, you almost know exactly what they're going to do. And then the pick 75 through 105, you have a pretty good idea of how much they're going to play. You just don't know exactly what that's going to translate to. And then after that is when you get into this like, oh, what if something clicks type of guys. And Ausar Thompson is definitely a what if something clicks type of fantasy player. I mean, just looking down the stretch gives us a little bit of an example. His minutes ticked up to 25.5 per game down the stretch last year. Cade missed a little bit of time in there. Tobias Harris missed a little bit of a time in there. Isaiah Stewart missed a little bit of time in there. Nobody missed like all of the time, but it almost felt like everybody with the exception of Jalen Duran missed a week over the season's final 4. I don't remember if they stacked or if it was staggered, but regardless, it helped Ausar Thompson. His minutes increased to that 25 and change. And then all of a sudden he went for 12, 5.5, 2.5, 2.5 defensive stats. He shot 50% from the field in those last 15 games. He shot 74% at the free throw line. That was one of the big ones for him. And just looking at his fantasy game, you can see how impressive he could be. Look at his rookie year, 25 minutes a game. He was at 9, 6.5, and 2 with a steal and a block. This last year, he played 22.5 minutes per game for the season, and he was at 10, 5, and 2 with 2.4 combined steals and blocks. And then down the stretch, as we talked about, when his minutes went up to 25, he was at 2.5 combined defensive stats in that stretch. The free throw number, I don't know. It's a little bit iffy. But we're still talking about a guy that's super young. Dude is 22. He'll be 23 around the halfway point for this coming season. Super young. Doesn't have a shot yet. He's doing all of this without the benefit of a shot. He is a steals behemoth. He can block shots. We've seen both. And if you look at some of these box scores down the stretch, when they kind of cut him loose a little bit more, these are big ones. 18 and 10, 2 assists, 2 steals, and 4 blocks. 13 and 8 with 6 defensive stats. 15, 7 and 4 with 5 defensive stats. 18, 11 and 5. 15, 4 and 5 with 4 defensive stats. He has the fantasy ability to be a top 50 play, mostly on the shoulders of defense, but a little bit with rebounds and assists kind of blended in, and what's likely to be an okay enough field goal percent. And that's the type of guy that belongs in that flyer territory. It's why we were so interested in Dyson Daniels last year as a first-tier flyer, because it's like, look, we've seen what this guy's done in 19 minutes a game. We saw him, he was the perfect confluence of things because he had a starting job for like 2 weeks in New Orleans over his entire time there. And he posted crazy counting stats and defensive stats, but he shot like 18% or some absurdly low number that you knew wasn't going to last, even like no matter how bad of a shooter you are. If you're in the NBA, you're not going to shoot 18%. So we saw like a non-mean reversion look. With Asar Thompson, we at least, like, you know what his percentages are likely to be. It's not quite the Dyson Daniels thing, but what if this year he takes a step forward? What if Asar Thompson gets 26 minutes a game this coming year? He could be top 75. What if the steals and blocks are great? And what if he gets his free throw number over 70 while playing 26 minutes a game this year? There is, dare I say, infinite upside, especially if Tobias Harris gets hurt, because the power forward backup minutes pretty much go straight to Asar Thompson when they're available. Now, Tobias historically has been a relatively durable dude, so I don't think we can count on that. But if you're looking at picks, like a pick around 110, and you're looking for that big upside swing where, yeah, maybe it does turn into a turd, Asar Thompson has to be near the top of your list. It's not quite like Amen Thompson last year where you were like, well, they're going to find 30 minutes for this guy. I don't think the Pistons are in that same exact bucket. And frankly, Asar Thompson is not as good of a playmaker as Amen Thompson. But, man, you can see the outlines. And last year I was extremely hesitant because it didn't look like they were going to give him any minutes. And that's great because it's kind of put a lid on what could now be the potential breakout year. So I'm into it. Rarely does this happen, but he's the guy that profiles in that zone. Let's talk about Tobias Harris next. I want to pick up the speed a little bit. Tobias is an easy one to pick up the speed because he's Toby, man. He's the veteran, quiet leader. He's screw it. I'm going to mess up the quote from the end of The Dark Knight. He's the hero that the Pistons needed, or not the one they deserved. I don't know. Screwed it up. It's a great movie, and I messed up the quote. So, kick me in the teeth for that one. Tobias's issue this last year was he didn't really get involved on offense until the halfway point. And I'll admit, that surprised the crap out of me. I thought he was going to be a more consistent offensive presence. I thought that he was going to be, playing behind Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, and he still found his way to like 13 shots a game. But he sort of, bent the knee to the likes of Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr., and those guys ended up taking 23 shots between them, and that left Tobias with, 10 or 11 most games. The good news on Toby is that he shot the ball very poorly the first half of the season. He shot the ball much better the second half of the season, and that kind of, again, didn't stand out because it moved his fantasy value very slowly up the board. He was like number 110 at the end of the first half of the year, and then the second half of the season, It was more than the first half. He didn't really get shooting. Yeah, I mean, I guess it was close to the first half. The final 2 months is when he really started to pick up the field goal percent, when he finally started to lift it. Because, again, it was like 44% the first half of the year, which is way down for him. Career 48, and lately more like 49, 50, 51. The 44, 45, 46, that was early career Tobias Harris. So he ended at 47.7 this year, but I don't think many people noticed that it was 44 for a while, and then it was 52 for a while. And during that stretch when he was shooting 52%, even though his usage didn't change all that much, he jumped up to a top 60 play. Now, the reality is he probably settles somewhere in between. Hopefully a little bit better this next year than the 47 and change this past season, but we don't know. It might drop back down. But one thing we know about Tobias is he's going to get you 14 points per game, or 15 if things go well. He's going to get you 6 rebounds. He's going to get you 2 to 3 assists. He's going to get you a steal or just under it. He's going to get you 0.7 blocks. He's going to do it on good percentages. He's going to get you between 1 and 2 3-pointers per game. He is the definition of super boring and reliable. He was like almost league average in basically every fantasy category, but that puts you near the top 80. I'd like to see him do a little bit more. I'll admit. I'd like to see him do a tiny bit more. But if you're rolling in 9-cat and your pick comes up and you're around pick 95 and he's still there, I say do it. End of the 8th round, beginning of the 9th round, he's a perfect candidate in that range because he doesn't fit into any specific team build better than almost any other. Like, he's just sort of fine at everything. And it gives you a consistent, reliable presence in your lineup that sometimes you just need that, a consistent, reliable presence. So those, to me, are the regulars on the Pistons, which was Cade, Duran, Ausar Thompson, Tobias Harris. I don't even know if Ausar Thompson is starting. But now you get into the 3 names that I kind of wonder about. I think if he's healthy, Jaden Ivy probably gets a starting job. He is the definition of a points league type of player. We just talked about like 5 guys on the Wizards on yesterday's show that all are the same as Jaden Ivy. He had a good season going, 18 points, 4 boards, 4 assists, 2 threes. That all sounds great, but he shot a medium volume 46% from the field, a medium volume 73% at the free throw line. He had 3 turnovers a game. You basically needed to figure out a multi-punt to get him inside the top 100. Your best bet there, by the way, would be turnovers and free throw percent, and that got him to about 106. I don't think his role gets any bigger. I don't know that his fantasy profile changes all that much. In fact, jumping up to 46% from the field was already a nice leap for him, and it's because he was running super hot from three-point land, which I don't know if that sticks all season anyway. So I'm probably not drafting Jaden Ivy in any 9-category leagues. If you're interested in the points league side, have at it. He's likely a top 100 play if you're not dealing with the percentages or turnovers. But even then, it's kind of barely because he looks better. The fantasy numbers seem like they're going to be better than they are. Like 17.5 points. Yeah, it's decent, but it's not great. 2 threes, decent, but not great. 4 boards, fine for a guard. 4 assists, also kind of fine for a guard. Less than a steal, There's a lot of in there that I wish would be ooh, and it's not quite. So probably a pass on Jaden Ivy. And one of the other reasons that I would consider the pass on Jaden Ivy is because Caris Levert is also Jaden Ivy. Not to say that they're the same exact player, but from a fantasy standpoint, they're pretty damn similar. Levert, career 44% from the field. Ivy, where is he from the field? We don't even know yet because he's 3 damn seasons in, but he's about 44% from the field. Jaden Ivy, career 74% at the free throw line. Caris Levert, career 74% at the free throw line. Caris Levert, career 4 rebounds, 4 assists. Jaden Ivy, 4 rebounds, slightly more than 4 assists. Levert, lower turnovers, I'll give him that, but right around 1 steal per game, 0.4 blocks was Jaden Ivy at these last few years, 0.8 steals and about 0.4 blocks. there's a redundancy there. Again, in reality, they're not the same player. Ivy's 6'4", 195. He's sort of shorter and has that burst of speed. Levert, 6'6", 205, a little bit longer, more wingy, more rangy. But from a fantasy standpoint, they have the same upsides and the same downsides. And we've watched Caris Levert long enough to know that the downside outweighs the upside on the fantasy profile unless multiple stars are down. Levert probably comes off the bench. He's probably the bench gunner for this team. He's that guy that can create when Ivy and Cunningham are not sort of on the hook for that. But the fantasy value just doesn't translate. So I'll pass on Jaden Ivy as well, or on Caris Levert as well. I don't even think I would go Caris Levert in points leagues because I don't know exactly what he's going to be asked to do. And finally, Duncan Robinson. The Pistons went out and got him knowing they needed somebody to space the floor. He is a longtime three-point shooting success story who's made a ton of money while kind of really on the shoulders of like one good season. He's a good three-point shooter. There's no question about that. Career 40%er, year in and year out. He's right around 40%, so at least you can count on that. He probably steps into some hybrid of the Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr. role. He's, Hardaway will go to the rim from time to time. Beasley didn't really. So Duncan, a little bit more Beasley than Hardaway. He's a better free throw shooter than either of those two guys. But I have trouble seeing Duncan Robinson at the level of aggression that Malik Beasley showed this last year. Beasley was just firing, man. Zero conscience. He took 13 shots in 28 minutes a game. That's like superstar level chucking. His usage doesn't jump out because he doesn't pass and he doesn't get to the free throw line. So it's literally just shots per minute for Beasley. But again, 13 shots per minute, that's like the same pace that Ivy was on. He's not a Cade Cunningham level shots per minute, but good Lord. So do we think Duncan Robinson comes in and gets 13 shots? I highly doubt it. I would love for Duncan Robinson to get 13 shots because he'd make 4 3-pointers a game if he got 13 shots a night, which, again, not a stretch because Malik Beasley hit basically 4 3-pointers a game. And again, better free throw shooter, everything else almost exactly the same. Duncan Robinson would be a top 100 fantasy player if he was getting 13 shots a night. I don't see how he possibly does. I also don't see how the Pistons don't start him, which I know sounds dumb, but and unfortunately, it's probably going to come down to Duncan Robinson or Asar Thompson. But if they start Thompson, you've got a starting lineup that averaged a grand total of about 5 3-pointers a game last year. Duran, 0. Asar Thompson, effectively 0. He was at 0.2. Tobias Harris, 1.2. So now you're at 1.4. Ivy, 2. So you're at 3.4, 3.5. Cade Cunningham, 2. So like 5.5 threes a game out of your starting 5. I know that just counting how many threes your starting lineup hit per game last year is not good NBA analysis, but Malik Beasley, who was oftentimes a bench gunner, hit 4 a game. Tim Hardaway hit 2.2. Replacing Hardaway with Asar Thompson, if that's the route they end up going, the floor spacing kind of ticks backward to the year before this last one. And they loved the fact that Cade had room to operate. So as much as I badly want Asar Thompson to start, and I hope that he's like the first tier flyer that we're talking about, unless they bench Jaden Ivy, which feels unlikely, just given the sort of offensive creation ability he has. They got to fit a 3-point shooter in there somewhere. Maybe Tobias Harris is the guy that gets punted. But I think they like his calming influence. Still, this big discussion we're having suggests that there aren't that many minutes, that in a best case scenario, Duncan Robinson does what Tim Hardaway Jr. did, which would be 28 minutes and about 9 shots per game. And that is not enough to get him inside the top 100. Still, if Duncan looks like he's going to start, and we'll find that out during the preseason, and he's still there at like pick 135, I would have trouble not grabbing him for the 3-pointers on a palatable field goal percent. Not great. Palatable is the story, because when things are going good for Duncan, he can get you 3 threes a game on 45%. But no steals, no blocks, no boards, very few assists. Like, we're talking top 100 is more the upside. So to me, he doesn't really profile in that, like, ooh, what if something good happens and things break the right way? That's probably top 100. That's like a best case scenario. Still, of these sort of trash heap guys on the Pistons that we just talked about, he probably has the best path to 9 cat value, just because he doesn't have those big negatives in his game that we talked about with someone like an Ivy or a Caris Levert. Still, if you're playing something where you're in a punt or you're in a points league, obviously Jaden Ivy is the more interesting player. But we're talking 9 cat, and so you just got to run the numbers. That's what the math says. And we love math here, members of the Old Man Squad. Thanks for watching, everybody. This one went a little bit longer than expected. My kids are back in school. LAUSD started yesterday, so it's all of a sudden now I'm not blitzing through my show in 22 minutes. 36 stinking minutes of content. Damn. Like, rate, subscribe. You guys know the drill. That's it for us this week. And I don't even know when this show's going to air. I might put it out over the weekend. So there. See you guys on Monday. Later, everybody. I'm Dan. Who cares?